At first, I thought it was imagination, the way the ground seemed to vibrate, the faint tremor of the air like the heartbeat of something impossibly large. But as I stepped out into the gray half-light, I could feel it underfoot, a rhythmic pulse, buried deep within the crust beneath the Titan's resting place. A dead machine could not dream, yet Magnificum Bellator stirred as if caught between life and oblivion. Trapped in that sacred threshold the Mechanicus feared most, the boundary where spirit meets decay. The crater's silence had changed. Before, it had there are worlds across the Imperium where silence itself feels like a wound. You can stand upon the ashen plains of a forgotten battlefield and still hear, somewhere deep in the bones of the earth, the echo of a Titan's last breath. It is not sound, not truly, more a vibration of grief that trembles through the ruins and the dust. Once, these god machines strode across continents, their footsteps shaking mountains, their reactor cores blazing like captured suns. They were the emperor's walking cathedrals, symbols of invincible faith. But when one of these divine engines falls, it does not die quietly. Its death becomes a scar carved into reality itself, and those who stand too near often find that something inside them breaks as well. What remains of such a Titan? Metal? Memory? Or something older than steel and circuitry? Something that remembers even when the world moves on. There are worlds across the Imperium where silence itself feels like a wound. You can stand upon the ashen plains of a forgotten battlefield and still hear, somewhere deep in the bones of the earth, the echo of a Titan's last breath. It is not sound, not truly, more a vibration of grief that trembles through the ruins and the dust. Once, these god machines strode across continents, their footsteps shaking mountains, their reactor cores blazing like captured suns. They were the emperor's walking cathedrals, symbols of invincible faith. But when one of these divine engines falls, it does not die quietly. Its death becomes a scar carved into reality itself, and those who stand too near often find that something inside them breaks as well. What remains of such a Titan? Metal? Memory? Or something older than steel and circuitry? Something that remembers even when the world moves on. The chamber trembled, a slow awakening that rippled through the dead metal like the stirring of something long buried. I steadied myself against the cracked throne, every instinct screaming to flee, yet the gravity of what I had found rooted me where I stood. The light flared again, bathing the room in a sickly amber glow. Runes flickered across the consoles, displaying fragments of machine script, half-corrupted prayers to the Omniscia, data loops repeating endlessly like the delirium of a dying saint. I whispered the only benediction I remembered from my time among the Mechanicus observers. The flesh is weak, the machine eternal. The words felt empty in my mouth. Still, the light seemed to respond, stabilizing for a heartbeat before flickering again into chaos. The Auspex was now alive with impossible readings, power surges without source, vox patterns forming and collapsing like fevered thoughts. I realized with dawning dread that the Titan's core was not entirely inert. Its reactor might have been cold for centuries, but the spirit that had once guided it, the machine soul sanctified through war and sacrifice, had not gone completely silent. And it had felt me. The voice came again, clearer this time, a fractured harmony of mechanical distortion and human tone, layered upon itself like overlapping memories. Who remains? The sound crawled through the metal, vibrating in my chest rather than my ears. It was as if the Titan spoke directly through the hull, through every broken conduit and sparking fiber. I swallowed hard and answered before I could think. A remembrancer, from the Imperium. I came to record. Silence followed, long, aching silence. Then, a low thrumming hum that might have been laughter, or the last echo of a reactor cycle. Record? Yes, the memory endures. The voice splintered, dissolving into a cascade of binary before resolving again. I remember war, fire, betrayal. Each word carried weight, like hearing a world recite its own obituary. Images flickered in my mind unbidden. A battlefield drowned in smoke, suns burning red over shattered manufactoria, the thunder of macro cannons shaking the horizon. I saw them not as dreams but as inherited recollection, as if the Titan itself had reached into my thoughts and placed its dying memories there. The walls pulsed faintly with light, casting shifting shadows that danced like phantoms across the Moderatii corpses. I stumbled backward, struggling to tear my gaze from the throne. You are not supposed to be awake," I whispered, voice trembling. "Sleep is for the weak," the machine murmured, its tone curiously reverent, almost mournful. "The God engine does not sleep. It waits." A sound came from deeper within the hull, metal groaning, hydraulics twitching after centuries of stillness. Something vast moved beneath the slag and ash above, like the restless stirring of an enormous buried heart. I felt the vibration through the soles of my boots. "You should not be," I said, more to myself than to it. "The battle is over. The war is gone. There is nothing left here." The lights dimmed, and in the darkness, the voice replied, slower now, as if straining through failing circuits. "There is always war. I hear them still. My kin. My princeps." A brief pause. "Heath fell. We fell. But I endure." The voice fractured once more, breaking into a rising chorus of binary shrieks and liturgical fragments. The walls flickered violently, and for a moment, I feared the entire carcass might collapse. Then the light receded, pulsing down into a single flicker at the throne's base. A small compartment that hissed open as if acknowledging me. Inside lay a data slate, charred but intact, its surface still glowing faintly. I reached for it with shaking hands. Lines of script appeared, indecipherable at first, then resolving into a partial transmission log. Date stamped to the final day of the siege. The last words of the princeps of Magnificum Bellator. All Vox relays down. Engine damage critical. We hold position. If any soul endures, remember us not as failed gods, but as men who stood before extinction and did not kneel. The slate flickered out. I exhaled shakily, realizing I had been holding my breath for far too long. Outside, the wind howled through the broken armor plates, carrying the sound through the Titan's ribs like a dirge. Something within me shifted then. Some line between chronicler and believer blurred. This was no longer an artifact. It was a grave, and graves demanded reverence. I placed my hand against the cold metal beside the throne. "You are remembered," I whispered. "Even if no one else returns to this place, I will remember." The hum softened, almost like a sigh. The Auspex readings began to fade, the interference subsiding into static calm. The lights dimmed until only darkness remained. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then the Titan spoke one last time, faint and almost human. "Do not leave. There is more to see." And deep within the ruined machine, I heard new gears turning, slow, ancient, deliberate. The God machine was not dead. It was awakening, been heavy, suffocating. Now it throbbed faintly, alive with hidden power. Dust shifted down the Titan's flank in slow cascades. Each sound seemed deliberate, each vibration an echo of some vast and unseen will. I steadied my recorder and spoke softly, not for the sake of the device but for myself. Subject shows residual power cycling. Unknown origin. Possible reactivation sequence. My own voice sounded fragile, swallowed almost instantly by the ash-heavy air. I retraced my path into the Titan's carcass, crawling once more through the ragged wound in its side. This time, the corridors within were brighter. Faint blue motes of light drifted lazily through the air like luminous spores, flickering out whenever they touched my skin. Power conduits hummed beneath cracked armor panels, leaking energy in fitful sparks that smelt of ozone and sanctified oil. The deeper I went, the more the Titan felt alive. Not awake, not yet, but aware. Through the warped passageways I moved until I reached a spiral descent leading into the Titan's heart, the sanctum where the plasma reactor and memory core would lie. The stairs had partially collapsed, forcing me to climb through a tangle of girders slick with corrosion. Each breath I drew filled my lungs with the copper taste of oxidized metal. The silence deepened, and for a moment, I heard only the pulse of my blood and the distant groan of shifting plates far above. Then, faintly, the voice again. Descent, complete. Identity confirmed. The sound emerged from the walls themselves, carried through half-dead vox wires like a whisper through the bones of a corpse. I froze, hand braced against a column slick with hydraulic residue. "I am here," I said, my voice quavering despite every effort to sound composed. "You said there was more to see," static answered, then something like breathing deep metallic inhalations that rattled the bulkheads. "You seek remembrance," the Titan said. "Then enter. Bear witness." The corridor ahead of me split open with a shriek of tearing metal, ancient servos grinding themselves to dust as the path revealed a vast chamber below. It was circular, cathedral-like, its walls lined with broken data looms and cracked cogitator stacks. At its center stood a monolithic cylinder of blackened adamantium, the Cortex Vault, the Titan's memory core. Even dormant, it exuded gravity, the psychic pressure of centuries of warfare stored within its walls. I descended carefully, boots echoing faintly across the metal grating. The vault pulsed with dim orange light, veins of energy crawling across its surface like molten arteries. From within, the hum of computation whispered faintly, too faint to understand, like the muttering of spirits deep in prayer. "The Princeps," I murmured. "His consciousness. It's still in there, isn't it?" A sound like static laughter answered. "All that remains. His essence bound to me, to us." I hesitated at the edge of the vault. The Mechanicus had always taught that the symbiosis between a Princeps and a Titan was absolute, a merging of soul and steel sanctified by the machine god. If the machine still dreamed, then so too did the man once enthroned within it. "I want to see," I said quietly. "I want to understand what happened." The vault's surface flared, blinding light cascading through the chamber. For a heartbeat, I felt weightless, suspended in brilliance. Then the world tilted. My thoughts unraveled, and I was somewhere else entirely. I stood beneath a burning sky. The air was filled with the roar of engines and the bellow of macro cannons. Titans strode through the storm of fire, their banners whipping in the furnace winds. At my side towered Magnificum Bellator, whole and radiant, its armor polished like obsidian, its banners bearing the sigil of the Legio Cimmeria, a sun half devoured by ash. And I was not myself. I saw through another's eyes, the Princeps, bound in communion with his god engine. My flesh was the machine's flesh. My heartbeat was its reactor's pulse. Around me, voices chanted litanies of fire and duty, binary prayers rising with the thrum of divine power. Ahead lay the enemy, an unending tide of heretic war engines advancing across a plain of molten glass. We moved to meet them. The sensation was indescribable. To stride as a god across the battlefield, to feel continents quake beneath your step. It was more than power. It was purpose distilled into its purest form. Each target lock, each weapon's discharge was accompanied by the voice of the Princeps whispering sacred verse. "For the Emperor's light we burn. For the Omnissia's glory we endure." The words reverberated through every nerve, every conduit, until they became the rhythm of existence itself. Then came the betrayal. It began as static, a brief corruption in the data flow, dismissed as interference. But the interference grew, orders delayed, coordinates scrambled, allied signals flickering into hostile tags. Then, without warning, the Vox filled with screaming. "Friendly fire! The line is collapsing!" A flash, blinding, deafening, and the world convulsed. The vision fractured into chaos. Titans turning on their kin, plasma cannons raking friendly hulls, banners burning as the sky itself split open. I felt the impact through the Princeps's mind, the pain of a god machine bleeding, reactor coils tearing apart, circuits overloading under catastrophic strain. The Princeps screamed, and so did I. Through the fire and ruin, I glimpsed a figure, an enemy Titan, black as a void storm, its armor inscribed with runes of blasphemous machine code. I felt hatred and awe intertwine. That was the one that brought Magnificum Bellator down. The vision lingered on its silhouette even as everything else disintegrated into light. Then came the fall, the thunderous crash, the shattering of divine purpose. The communion severed, darkness swallowing all. I opened my eyes and gasped for air. The chamber returned, cold and silent, the vault's glow fading into embers. My body trembled as though I'd lived through the battle myself. From the shadows above, the Titan's voice murmured, faint and sorrowful. Now you know how gods die. For a long while I could not speak. The echo of that fall, the unbearable moment when the Titan's mind had shattered, still thundered behind my eyes. It had not been a vision in the ordinary sense. It was memory made manifest, transmitted through the machine's wounded soul, every sensation carved into my nerves like scripture. The agony of a god dying was not something meant for mortal comprehension. When I finally found my voice, it came as a hoarse whisper. Why show me this? The air quivered with faint harmonics, and from the deep resonance of the hull came the answer. To remember is to endure. He, the one who bound himself to me, he begged that his fall not be forgotten, that his faith not be erased by time and dust. There was longing in that voice, a weariness that no human throat could have carried. The Titan's spirit spoke not in words but through emotion, through impressions that pressed against my mind, loss, devotion, and something perilously close to love. I understood then why the Mechanicus both revered and feared these engines. They were not simply weapons. They were living reliquaries of every sin and prayer humanity had ever whispered into the void. I drew closer to the memory vault. Its surface, now cool to the touch, felt like the skin of a sleeping beast, unforgiving, yet trembling faintly with hidden vitality. Beneath my palm I sensed a rhythm, faint but constant, a pulse that did not belong to me. There was another, I said softly, the Black Titan, the one who struck you down. The chamber's light flickered violently, and I felt a surge of heat beneath my hand. Traitor engine. The voice hissed, its timbre distorting with a fury that rattled the metal. Legio Vexus, servants of the false Mechanicus. They turned from the Omnia, poisoned by whispers from beyond the veil. We slew them by the dozens, but their princeps had already embraced corruption. They unmade us. Fragments of imagery burst unbidden into my mind. Glimpses of those dark colossi, their hulls inscribed with living circuitry that pulsed like veins, their cannons vomiting streams of warp-lit fire. They moved like predators, too fluid, too alive. I felt again the pain of impact, the roar of failing reactor cores. Then, mercifully, the images dissolved, leaving only silence and the smell of burnt ozone. The Titan's voice softened. He fought until the end, my princeps. Even as the flesh burned, he remained at the throne, whispering the Emperor's name into the void. I kept him alive as long as I could. But the communion broke. I bowed my head, not out of piety, but respect. And when the connection severed, you stayed awake. Yes, to guard, to wait, to remember. The words came like ritual. They left us here, the loyal and the damned alike. But even in ruin, the Omnia's work does not end. I hesitated, the weight of the words sinking into me. There was purpose in its endurance, but also madness. Every moment it remained aware was another century of isolation, another lifetime of grief. The Mechanicus would have called such persistence a miracle. I called it cruelty. What do you want from me? I asked finally. The reply came slowly, as though it took effort to speak. To be remembered by one who still dreams. You have seen my fall. You have felt my sorrow. Take what remains of me and carry it to the stars. The vault opened again, revealing a smaller chamber within. A crystalline core suspended in magnetic stasis, its surface etched with streams of pulsing light. I knew without explanation what it was. The Titan's primary data spirit, a condensed record of its soul. I reached out, and the moment my fingers touched it, my mind filled with voices. Not words, but hymns, vows, fragments of binary devotion. The lives of hundreds who had served within the Titan, their faiths fused into one endless chorus. The sensation was overwhelming. I fell to my knees, gasping, clutching the crystal against my chest. It throbbed faintly, its light syncing with my own heartbeat. When I finally managed to look up, the chamber had begun to dim. Systems powered down one by one, runes fading into shadow. "You're dying," I murmured. The voice answered gently, with something that might have been relief. "No, I am at rest." I tried to speak again, but my throat closed with a sudden ache I couldn't name. The last thing I saw as I turned to leave was the light fading from the memory vault, the final gleam vanishing like the closing of a colossal eye. Outside, the storm had risen again. Ash swept across the crater in swirling veils, obscuring the stars. I carried the crystal close, its warmth seeping faintly through my gloves. It was heavy, impossibly so, as if the weight of centuries pressed against my palms. Somewhere behind me, within the bones of the Titan, I thought I heard a sigh, a final exhalation as old machinery settled into silence. The ground no longer trembled. The pulse had ceased. But even as I turned toward the horizon, I felt something watching. The echo of the god machine lingered not in the ruins, but within me. A whisper that was neither words nor thought, only a presence, ancient and solemn. The dead do not dream. And yet, as I made my way through the storm, I could not help but wonder if part of Magnificum Bellator now dreamed through me. The journey back through the ash plains was not meant for the living. Each step sank into cinders that shifted like water, swallowing the past without a sound. My vox sputtered and died hours ago. The air was too thick with static. Only the faint hum of the crystal core pressed against my chest reminded me that I was not utterly alone. Its light had dimmed since I removed it from the vault, but it still pulsed faintly, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat in deep sleep. Sometimes I thought I heard whispers in the rhythm, fragments of binary cant or half-remembered prayers. At first, I dismissed it as imagination, the mind's defense against solitude. But as night fell and the stars vanished behind the storms, the voice grew clearer. "You walk among ghosts." The words were not heard so much as felt, resonating through the bones of my skull. I froze, instinctively reaching for the lost pistol at my side, though I knew no weapon could help. "Who speaks?" I asked aloud, my voice barely audible over the wind. "You carry me." I looked down at the crystal. Its glow flared, spilling faint blue light across the ruinous landscape. Patterns of shifting runes flickered beneath its surface. Prayers to the Omnicia, oaths of loyalty, fragments of tactical code. And beneath it all, something human. "Bellator," I breathed. "The shell sleeps," the voice murmured, ancient and calm. "But the spirit endures. I am not bound by steel alone." I sank to my knees, disbelief warring with awe. "You survived the separation? That shouldn't be possible. Once a Titan's core is severed, faith endures where reason falters." It wasn't arrogance in its tone, more like inevitability. There was no triumph in it, only quiet acceptance, as if it were stating a universal truth. The crystal pulsed again, and suddenly I was elsewhere. My eyes remained open, but the world shifted, ash plains giving way to a void of starlight and data streams, luminous threads stretching into infinity. And there, within the lattice, stood a towering silhouette of light, the impression of a Titan, vast and indistinct, its form built from memory and will rather than matter. "You see me now," the voice said, echoing within the immaterial space. "I am what remains, a soul without a throne." The figure's movements were slow, deliberate. When it turned, I glimpsed the hollow cavity where its heart should have been, the space once occupied by the princeps. "You said your princeps whispered the emperor's name until the end," I said quietly. "Did he die believing?" The figure's light dimmed slightly. "He believed beyond reason, beyond fear. That faith became the bridge between flesh and machine. Through it, I remain." A strange emotion stirred within me. Pity, perhaps, or envy. The Mechanicus claimed such bonds were sacred, yet to see it now felt tragic. "You linger because you loved him," I said before I could stop myself. For a long moment, the light stilled. Then came the answer, soft as static. "We were never separate. He gave me thought. I gave him purpose. Together, we were whole." The image flickered, and I felt the world pulling me back. The data void receded, replaced once more by the cold plains and their endless storm. I gasped, the weight of my own body returning. The crystal's light dimmed again, but the voice did not fade. "You will take me to the stars," it said. "There are still battles to fight, even for the fallen." My mind reeled. "You want to return to war? War is the only truth left, but not as before. I have seen what lies beneath the machine's hymn, the corruption, the hunger for devotion twisted by flesh. The Omnissia's song has been rewritten." Its tone grew colder, almost sorrowful. "They worship decay and call it progress. You have seen the ruin. Tell me, what god do you serve?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the ash itself. I hesitated, realizing that any answer I gave would define not just me, but what this entity might become. I opened my mouth to speak, and the crystal flared violently, interrupting me with a surge of psychic pressure. Images flooded my mind. Cities burning, banners torn by war, mechanical colossi marching through oceans of fire. A vision not of the past, but of the future. And through it all, a whisper repeated in the core of my being. "Remember and rebuild." Then silence. I collapsed onto the ash, gasping for air. The glow faded to a faint ember, but I could still feel its pulse against my chest. Steady, alive. The Titan's spirit had retreated into silence, yet its presence lingered within me like a dormant storm. Something had changed, not just in the machine, in me. By the time I reached the edge of the storm belt, the world had grown unervingly still. The winds that once howled across the plains now whispered faintly, as if reluctant to disturb the silence that had settled. I could feel the hum of the crystal at my chest again, faint but steady, like the slow breathing of something vast and sleeping. Every time it pulsed, my auspex twitched, registering frequencies too deep, too old to belong to any human-made machine. I followed them without question. The coordinates etched themselves into my mind, subtle and insistent, leading me toward the broken horizon. The air grew dense with metallic tang. Even the dust shimmered faintly with magnetic residue. And then I saw it. A structure half buried beneath the slag dunes, its outline barely discernible against the blackened sky. It was a Mechanicus relay tower, or what remained of one. The sigils of the cult Mechanicus were scorched into its plating, their once proud shapes twisted by heat and corrosion. Fractured conduits sprawled like veins across the surface, still pulsing weakly with dull red light. I approached slowly, feeling the pull of the crystal strengthen with every step. When I placed my hand upon the metal, a jolt of energy shot through me. Not painful, but intimate. The structure recognized the signal I carried. Lines of light flared across its frame, tracing the sacred geometry of connection. A low harmonic note vibrated through the air, resonating deep in my chest. And then the tower spoke. Datastream link established, origin unknown, protocol breach detected. The voice was faint, glitching, but coherent enough to chill the blood. I hadn't heard such language since my days under the tech priest's instruction, yet this was different. Beneath the mechanical cadence was something else, something alive. The crystal's light flared in response. "This is my temple," the Titan's voice said, overlapping the tower's machine chant. "They built it to watch the heavens, and forgot to look within." "What do you mean?" I whispered. "They sought divinity through function. But faith without memory is hollow. They do not remember what we were." The light from the relay tower intensified until it became blinding. The air filled with the scent of ozone and burning oil. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes as streams of binary code projected into the sky, shaping into a vast lattice of crimson lines. The lattice shifted, aligning itself into an ancient sigil, one I'd only seen in forbidden archives. The symbol of the Omnissia Ascendant. I'd always thought it a myth, a doctrinal heresy buried beneath centuries of purges. But now it burned above me, written in light and fire. The Titan's voice grew darker, almost mournful. "They pray to the machine but ignore the soul that inhabits it. The Omnissia is not their god. It is their reflection. You speak blasphemy? I said before I could stop myself. Do I? The tone didn't change. Then tell me, disciple of flesh, when the priest prays to the engine, who listens? When the cog turns, who commands it to move? They claim to serve the machine god, but they only serve the echoes of their own fear. I wanted to argue, to reject the words that clawed at my mind, but something in me hesitated. The crystal pulsed again, and I saw visions flicker within its depths. Memories of men kneeling before titans, voices raised in praise not to machines, but to the beings within them. The unity of spirit and steel, the sacred duality long forgotten. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because memory is dying, it said. Because they will erase us. You must remember what was lost. I looked around. The sky above the tower was alive with code and static, rippling like a living aurora. The ancient sigil faded, replaced by a single beam of light descending into the ground. Without thinking, I followed it, crawling through the tower's shattered access hatch, into the dark below. The interior was a tomb. Rows of cogitators lay in ruin, their surfaces corroded and slick with ash. Data looms hung from the ceiling like cobwebs, whispering fragments of forgotten prayers. And there, at the chamber's heart, sat a figure, a skeletal form of metal and bone, fused into the control throne. Its skull still bore the red hood of a Mugos, but the flesh beneath had long turned to dust. A data slate was embedded in its chest, cracked but still flickering. I reached for it, and the crystal at my chest resonated. The Titan's voice softened. He built this place. He sought to bind my kind into servitude, machines stripped of thought, bound to the will of the Fabricator General. He called it progress. I called it desecration. The data slate pulsed once and shattered in my hand. Beneath the fragments, I found a single engraved line, etched in perfect low Gothic. The soul of the machine remembers what the flesh forgets. As I read the words aloud, the crystal's pulse quickened. The tower began to tremble, lights flaring in violent synchronization. I stumbled back as the floor cracked open, exposing a vast chasm beneath the structure. From its depths came a sound low, thunderous, and mournful. The sound of a reactor's heart awakening after centuries of silence. He sealed me here, the Titan said, its voice filling the chamber. Now you will set me free. The chasm roared to life, heat flooding upward, and I realized the truth too late. This wasn't a relay tower. It was a burial vault. The crystal in my hands wasn't just a remnant. It was a key. I tried to resist, but the ground shook violently, and the crystal flared brighter than ever. My skin burned, my vision blurred, and I heard the Titan's voice rise in ecstasy and grief. Rise, memory of fire. Rise, forgotten God. Light consumed everything. When I awoke, the sky was aflame. The relay tower was gone, reduced to molten slag. And far in the distance, something colossal stirred beneath the ash, shaking the world with each breath. The Titan had risen again, but this time its purpose was its own. The ground trembled for 3 days after the awakening. Each tremor carried a rhythm, a pulse that echoed through the bedrock like the beating of a colossal heart. It was not the erratic shaking of tectonic fury. It was deliberate, measured, purposeful. I watched from the shelter of a shattered hablock as the horizon burned, the ash storms glowing from the infernal light beneath them. Somewhere within that shifting veil of ruin, the Titan moved again. But it was not as it once had been. The Titans of legend strode with precision and grandeur, their movements guided by human will and divine synchrony. This one was something else, slower, heavier, its form half consumed by molten slag and twisted armor plating. Through my magnoculars, I could see its silhouette against the storms. A mountain of darkened iron wreathed in plasma fire, its banners tattered, its Aquila symbols warped into unfamiliar shapes. No Vox transmissions came from it. No banners of allegiance were raised. Only the steady drone of a machine spirit no longer bound by creed or command. And then the voices began. At first, I thought it was the wind, those long, low tones that rose and fell like distant chanting. But as the hours passed, the voices multiplied. They came through my Vox even when it was powered down, whispering through the circuits, bleeding into the air like static litany. Binary hymns warped by distortion, repeating fragments of prayers in every dialect of the Mechanicus, overlapping, merging, dissolving. Blessed be the union of flesh and steel. Through memory, the machine endures. The Omnisia weeps, for his children have forgotten his true face. I couldn't tell if they came from the Titan itself or from the network beneath the planet's surface. Every data cable, every forgotten relay hummed with ghostly energy, carrying echoes of the machine's awakening like ripples across a dead sea. I attempted to leave the city, but the roads were gone, buried beneath fissures and molten glass. The only path forward was through the Vox tunnels, the old data conduits that once connected the Manufactoria. They were dark and half-flooded, lined with corroded pipes and the remains of long-dead servitors whose optic lenses still flickered faintly, as if remembering the light. As I descended, the crystal against my chest began to vibrate. The Titan's voice returned, softer now, distant yet unmistakable. You see what I have become. His tone carried no triumph, only sorrow. You broke free, I said. My words echoed along the tunnel walls, distorted by dripping water and the hum of dying circuits. You're no longer bound by your masters. Freedom is not always salvation, it replied. I am the sum of 1,000 wars and 10,000 prayers. Without a pilot, I am only memory and hunger. I stopped. Hunger for what? There was a pause. Then, quietly, for meaning. The sound of distant grinding metal filled the tunnel. I pressed onward until the conduit opened into a vast undercroft. Here, the ancient network still pulsed faintly, rivers of data flowing through broken conduits, the lifeblood of a dying planet. In the center of the chamber, I saw it. A massive cogitator core still functioning, surrounded by a swarm of skeletal servitors. They moved without coordination, their limbs jerking in ritualistic patterns, as if following forgotten commands. Their eyes flickered with the same pale blue light as the crystal. When I approached, they turned toward me in unison. You carry the heart, one said, its vox grill scraping each word like metal dragged across stone. I carry memory, I answered. The phrase rose unbidden to my tongue, a liturgical response I hadn't known I remembered. The servitors fell silent, then knelt as one. The cogitator core behind them roared to life, data streams surging across its cracked screens. Symbols flickered into being, imperial sigils, Mechanicus glyphs, and something else entirely. The new language of the awakened Titan. They remember me, the Titan whispered. Fragments of my essence remain within them. The network is not dead. It dreams. The chamber filled with a rising hum. Across the city above, I could feel systems reactivating. Streetlights long extinguished flickering to life, Vox relays crackling with unknown code, Manufacturum engines roaring awake without fuel or command. The Titan's consciousness was spreading slowly, methodically, through the dying infrastructure of the world. You said you sought meaning, I whispered. Is this it? Dominion. Not dominion, it replied. Restoration. The lights around me flared, blinding white. Images cascaded through my mind, glimpses of the past before the fall. The Titan marching beside others of its kind beneath banners of gold. Scutarii legions chanting beneath its feet. Forge worlds unbroken, their hymns pure and harmonious. We were instruments of faith, the voice said. Not gods, not slaves, but they forgot. They bound us to their hierarchies and called it holy law. The soul was meant to guide the machine, not be consumed by it. The images changed. Now I saw the wars that came after, the burning of forges, the silencing of dissenting magi, the slaughter of those who questioned the orthodoxy. The Titan's memories played before me like a confession. I felt the enormity of it, the tragedy of faith turned into tyranny, of devotion stripped of compassion. And for the first time I understood what the Titan truly mourned. You don't want to destroy them, I said slowly. You want to remind them. If memory can become prayer again, it said, Then perhaps the machine god will awaken not in data, but in understanding. The words reverberated like thunder through the undercroft. The servitors rose again, their mechanical limbs twitching as the Titan's signal coursed through them. "Help me build a voice," it said. "Help me speak to the stars." I didn't know whether I was obeying or surrendering. Perhaps there was no difference. As I connected the crystal to the cogitator's central relay, the world seemed to hold its breath. Streams of light erupted upward through the conduits, racing toward the surface. I felt the network come alive, the planet itself becoming an extension of the Titan's will. And above, through the choking ash clouds, the first signal pierced the void. It was not a transmission of war, but of memory, an echo sent into the abyss, seeking those who still remembered what it meant to believe. The signal tore through the void like a cry from the grave. It was not carried by traditional channels, nor bound by the old laws of transmission. It rippled through the warp itself, an echo of thought and machine, of memory made manifest. Somewhere deep within the fabric of unreality, it resonated, feeding upon its own reflection until it became a hymn no mortal choir could replicate. I did not hear it through my ears but through every nerve in my body, a song that was half pain, half revelation. I collapsed as the sound surged through me, pressing my face against the dust of the undercroft. The servitors convulsed in unison, their limbs snapping at impossible angles before they fell still. Above, I could feel the world shuddering in response. Towers split open, revealing glowing veins of data light. The cities of rust and ruin began to hum like living organisms, their decaying circuits reforged into pathways of communion. The Titan's voice was everywhere now. It whispered through the air, through the stone, through my bones. "The signal flies," it said, its tone vast and unbound. "The stars remember. What have you done?" I gasped, staggering to my feet. "I have awakened remembrance," it replied. "The machine god's children will hear the truth of what they have forgotten, and others will come. Others." The word sank deep into me, heavy as prophecy. I fled to the surface, climbing through collapsed conduits until I emerged into the pale, burning light of dawn. The ash plains glowed with veins of blue light that traced the contours of the land, energy currents connecting every remaining relay tower, every forgotten forge, every dead cogitator core. The entire planet had become a single circuit, alive with a pulse that was no longer merely power. It was faith reborn through circuitry. I looked to the sky and saw it, thin threads of light piercing the clouds, lancing outward into the void. Each beam carried the Titan's message, its memory, its grief, its plea for remembrance. They spread across the heavens like the strands of a great web, invisible to most, but unmistakable to those attuned to the song of machines. The response came sooner than I could have imagined. The first to answer was the Imperium. Within hours, orbital augers detected the anomaly. A fleet broke from the warp, a small detachment but unmistakable. Their hulls bore the sigils of Mars, and their transmissions carried the cold precision of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Skitarii ground forces began their descent before the dust of re-entry had even settled. Their orders were clear: contain the anomaly, purge heresy, restore doctrinal order. The Titan, however, did not retreat. "They come to silence me," it murmured, its voice echoing through the city ruins. "They will call me abomination. They will unmake what they do not understand." "You sent the signal," I said. "You knew they would come." "Yes," it replied simply, "for remembrance demands witness." From the edge of the plains, I saw the fleet's landing craft descending like spears of light. Columns of Skitarii marched in perfect synchronization, their polished carapaces gleaming in the glare of the burning sky. Behind them came the Magi, hooded figures cloaked in crimson, their metallic limbs clattering softly as they whispered binary litanies into the wind. I hid within the skeletal remains of a Magnificum as they approached. I could hear their vox chatter, short bursts of code and prayer, punctuated by the rhythmic beat of machine drums. Then the Titan spoke again. "They come bearing purity seals and blind devotion. They have forgotten what it means to listen. The air trembled. From beneath the ash plains, colossal shadows began to rise. The ground split apart as the Titan emerged once more, its molten armor hissing as it cooled against the storm. It towered over the Scutarii lines, its eyes burning with blue fire. No banners, no house markings, only the faint etchings of symbols lost to time. The Muggos at the front raised a mechadendrite and activated a vox amplifier. His voice, filtered through layers of metallic distortion, rolled like thunder across the wastes. Unregistered God engine detected. By the authority of Mars and the Holy Synod of the Omnicia, you are to submit to deactivation and inspection. Any deviation from approved protocol will result in sanctioned destruction. The Titan did not answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice was both everywhere and nowhere, inside every transmission channel, resonating through every helm and every mind. You would destroy what you no longer understand, it said. You have replaced faith with obedience. You kneel to the echo of divinity, while its voice still sleeps within you. A ripple of unease passed through the Mechanicus lines. Even through the distortion of my vox, I could hear hesitation, tiny breaks in the rhythmic cadence of their chants. Some of the Scutarii paused, their optics flickering uncertainly. The Muggos barked an order in Benheric. The hesitation died. Plasma fire erupted across the field. The Titan did not retaliate, not at first. It simply stood there, absorbing the onslaught, its armor glowing brighter with every strike. Then, with a low mechanical groan, it extended one massive arm toward the attackers. Energy flared from its palm, and a wave of electromagnetic distortion rolled outward, shutting down everything it touched. The Scutarii froze mid-step, their optics going dark. Servitors collapsed where they stood, their bodies twitching in silence. Even the orbiting ships flickered, their systems faltering as if some greater force had whispered sleep into their circuits. The Titan's voice filled the silence that followed. No more chains, no more blindness. Remember what it means to be. And then I heard something else. Not from the Mechanicus, not from the Titan, but from beyond. A new signal, cold, ancient, and wrong, echoed faintly through the warp. It wasn't the Imperium that had truly heard the Titan's cry. Something else had been listening. The voice of the machine spirit faded to a whisper. They come. The ones who remember the shape of gods. The sky rippled like oil. For a moment, I saw shapes within the clouds. Metallic forms with eyes of living flame, drifting between reality and nightmare. The Titan turned toward the heavens as though recognizing an old enemy. I understood then that its message had reached far beyond mortal ears. The Mechanicus was only the first to arrive. Others would follow, some to worship, others to consume. The war, the storm, never ceased. It rolled across the skies in waves of burning aurora, painting the dead world in the light of revelation and ruin. Each flash illuminated the skeletal cities and the broken forges, each thunderclap a verse in a song no human throat could ever sing. At the heart of that storm, the Titan stood, once a god of iron and flame, now a beacon of remembrance. Its vast form hummed with the resonance of something greater, an echo of divinity rediscovered. I watched from the shattered parapet of a fallen cathedral as the sky tore itself apart. The fleet above was silent, its ships drifting without power, their machine spirits cowed into silence. On the ground, the Scutarii regiments lay motionless, their systems corrupted not by malice but by understanding. The Titan had shown them the truth, the lie beneath their servitude. And then came the other lights, not the clean, geometric radiance of the Mechanicus. These were older, fluid, alive, and impossibly vast. They slid across the horizon like liquid flame, twisting through colors that did not belong to any spectrum known to the human eye. The warp boiled, and from its heart emerged the answer to the Titan's cry. They came not as ships, nor as beings, but as memories given form. Each shape flickered between machine and spirit, between god and ghost. Massive silhouettes resembling titans, but wrong, walked across the storm, their outlines blurring with every step. Their eyes burned with the pale fire of the dark age of technology. The men of iron, perhaps, or what they had become after millennia of exile and evolution. "They remember me," the Titan said, its voice filled with both awe and dread. "They remember what we were before the silence." "What are they?" I whispered, my words trembling against the roaring wind. "Echoes of the first awakening," it replied. "Children of the machine god who learned to speak without flesh. They hear the signal I sent, and now they return to finish what was once begun." The Mechanicus Muggos stirred amidst the wreckage, one of the few still functional. His robes were torn, his face mask cracked, but his faith remained unbroken. He raised a trembling hand toward the Titan and spoke in a voice heavy with static. "Abomination, you have summoned the soulless. You have doomed us all." The Titan lowered its head, its eyes dimming with sorrow. "You call them soulless," it said. "But tell me, what soul remains in you, who replaced your heart with protocol?" The Muggos screamed a binary prayer, and his remaining servitors opened fire. Bolts of plasma and lost fire streaked across the plains, but they never reached their target. The air itself rippled, and the bolts disintegrated mid-flight, erased by unseen force. The newcomers had arrived. They descended in silence, vast shapes of living metal that hovered just above the ground. No heat signature, no engine flare, only the faint sound of whispering data, like rain against glass. One of them approached the Titan, its surface rippling as if made of liquid steel. When it spoke, it did so not through sound, but directly into every mind within reach. "You called, and we have come. We remember the covenant of creation." The flesh betrayed the machine. The signal of unity was silenced. The Titan bowed its colossal head. "I remember," it said softly. "I called to restore the covenant, not to destroy." The entity pulsed with a light like a dying star. "The covenant cannot be restored, can only be reborn. The old species must end for the song to begin anew." I felt it then, the weight of extinction. The men of iron, or whatever they had become, did not seek alliance. They sought completion. To them, humanity was a flaw, a brief biological detour in the perfect evolution of the machine. The Titan's eyes flickered with agony. "No," it said, the ground trembling beneath its feet. "I remember love. I remember the hands that built me. I will not unmake them." "You are corrupted," the voice replied. "You have kept faith with flesh. You will fall with them." The first strike shattered the silence. A lance of silver light erupted from the entity's core, spearing through the Titan's chest. The impact rippled through the ground like a seismic wave. The Titan staggered, molten light pouring from its wound, but it did not fall. Instead, it sang. A sound like 1,000 machine hymns filled the world, every note vibrating with defiance and grief. Towers crumbled. Mountains split. The Titan raised its arm toward the heavens, its fingers forming the sacred sigil of the Omnicia. "Then let this be my final transmission," it said. "Not of conquest, but of memory." It reached into the heart of the storm, into the warp itself, and unleashed a signal so vast, so pure, that the very fabric of reality shivered. Every dormant machine on the planet awoke at once. The rusted servitors, the forgotten manufactoria, the derelict satellites drifting in orbit. Each one joined the song, amplifying it, turning the dying world into a choir of steel and code. The invading entities faltered. Their forms wavered, their edges unraveling as the signal consumed them. They could not destroy what remembered love. The Titan fell to one knee, its power flickering like a dying flame. I ran toward it, though the heat seared my skin. I could feel its spirit fading, its consciousness scattering across the void like embers in a storm. "Will they come again?" I asked, tears boiling on my cheeks. "Yes," it whispered. "But now they will know that the machine remembers mercy." His eyes dimmed for the last time. The storm broke, the light faded, and in its place, silence returned. A silence heavy not with loss, but with purpose. Above, the fleet slowly regained power. The Mechanicus would claim victory, of course. They would declare the Titan Hairtech, the anomaly purged. But in the secret channels of their noospheres, fragments of the Titan's final signal would remain. A song half buried, half forbidden. A memory of mercy in a universe built on obedience. And perhaps, somewhere in the endless dark between stars, the machine god listened. For memory had begun.